Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to Cost Control in Construction. Today's topic is going to be cash flow. Cash flow objectives, things that we're going to think about and discuss today. We want to be able to look at the importance of exactly what does cash flow mean in a construction project? What does it mean to the business? What does it mean to the trades that work on the project? What does it mean to the client? There's a lot of different perspectives when it comes to cash flow. And how you think about it is very important. And understanding how others think about it is equally important because it can affect your business model. We'll talk about some of the impacts when you don't get paid when you want to get paid. And we'll describe it from the various parties right on down through the project. We'll also talk about holdback amounts and depending on your jurisdiction, how that impacts your project. So we can think of cash flow as two areas, really. You've got cash inflows and you've got cash outflows. So you've got money that comes into the business, you've got money that goes out. And the money that comes in doesn't always match the money that goes out. So first off, you have your whole project that you've quoted, and the project might be quite profitable. So when we think about cash flow, we have net cash flow, the measurement of the money coming in, and the measurement of the money going out. So we have our whole project, which we have bid on, we've been awarded it, and we have to execute on it. Well, the project might be profitable as a whole, meaning that if you take all of your direct costs for the project, how much labor, how much resources it's going to require, you cover your overhead to run your office, and you have a margin for profit that you're shooting for, the project might be very good. But if you have, during the execution of the project, more money going out than is coming in, you may have a liquidity problem. You may have a cash shortfall, which means you can't pay people. And if you can't pay people, your own employees, your subcontractors, they're not going to work for you for very long. To be able to manage that effectively so you can get through the project, you can be paid in full and get that profit, have that money that goes towards the overhead, and have been able to pay all of the parties involved through the project as was negotiated in the terms of their contract. They're your employees, every 2 weeks. That is important. Not only that, you've got individual projects, and some of the individual projects, they might overlap each other. They will overlap each other as a business, so that you could have a perfect storm going on where you have a lot of money going out and maybe you have a delay in some of the money coming in. So you need to be able to smooth through those areas and ensure that you have enough cash to pay your bills. And if you foresee in the future you don't have enough cash, you have to negotiate those terms ahead of time with your financial lending institutions, lines of credits, other financing that you may acquire in a variety of ways. As long as you've done that ahead of time and you're not in reactive mode, then you should still be okay as long as your projects are profitable. So these are all the things that we have to think about with cash flow. And if we think about in a perfect world, from the contractor's perspective, you get paid everything before you start the project. Then you got no risk. You don't have to worry about somebody that you're doing work for going bankrupt or not wanting to pay you, etc. That would be a perfect world for the contractor. Owners, a perfect world for them would be they pay you at the very end of the project. So, you do all the work, they check it out, everything is perfect, here you go. They have no risk that you're going to go bankrupt partway through the project and they have to get another contractor in and they're going to charge them a lot more money. Or they paid you more than you did the work for and then you disappear, all of those kinds of things. And so from an owner's perspective, they're very concerned about overpaying during the process. Then we could go look at the next tier. You've got suppliers, you've got sub-trades, your trade partners that you're working with. Well, if I'm a supplier and I'm supplying you hundreds of thousands of dollars of materials, I don't want to wait for that money very long, right? Like I might have 30 days that you are to pay me within. And if you don't pay me within that, that's going to be a problem. I'm not going to give you any more materials and I'm going to start some liens on the property that you're working with. So that's another issue that you deal with cash flow. Your sub trades, well, they got businesses, they've got suppliers to pay, they've got employees to pay, they've got overhead, they're shooting for profit. They want to receive their money so that they reduce their risk. So you've got all of these different tiers at play in a construction project. And your goal is typically to negotiate the longest payments as possible without making the other party nervous, without making the other party not want to do business with you. So there's just this fine line as what's long enough. And in construction, in Ontario, Canada, we've had this issue where the payment dates were getting longer and longer and longer. And as in many countries, this is an issue where, 25 years ago, you get paid within 30 days, and then it's like 45 days, and then it's like 60 days, and then it's like 90 days. The longer it takes to get paid, the less likely it is that you ever get paid. So there's been legislation that's been put in place to shorten the time periods that you receive payment. In Ontario, we call it the Construction Act, which says that you're to pay within 30 days, and there's all of these requirements involved. Whatever your state or province requirements are, they may be slightly different. So you have to always look at whatever jurisdiction you're in and what are the legislative requirements with regards to payment. But it doesn't matter. It's always a tricky kind of field that way. So you definitely look at that, and the subcontractor is looking at that as well, and the suppliers, and they want to make sure that they're not being delayed in their payments. Many businesses have gone under as a result of that, and they were good businesses and they had profitable jobs, but they didn't have the liquidity, and then their assets are seized and things are closed down on them, and then their employees go elsewhere and the business is over. Construction, we deal with very, very large volumes of money. It's not like you're buying, inexpensive products. You are buying multi-million-dollar products, and those payment streams are required to be able to continue on with the work. Some construction clauses, like you have to be very careful about what some construction clauses may say in your contracts. In some of the states in the U.S., there are some pretty aggressive clauses that clients may put in, and some of the provinces in Canada, the same deal. There's an interesting article here by the Construction Law Canada on pay when paid requirements clauses are in contracts. Many states and provinces like Ontario, you don't. Like you can put it in, but it's not really enforceable. So you have to really look at what's the legislation in your particular state or province. What is a pay when paid? It means that I'm the general contractor and I'm not going to pay my subcontractor until I'm paid, right? So the subcontractor did their work and you're going to pay them when you get paid. So if it gets delayed, they get delayed. So that way, that's pretty good for you as a GC, because you've just reduced that risk that, the client doesn't pay you. Now, at least you don't have to pay the subcontractor, right? You only have to worry about what your markup was on that subcontractor's price. You don't have to worry about the whole subcontractor price. The problem is, if I'm the subcontractor, what if you take your time in invoicing the client for the work that I did, and you take a lot of extra time? That could be time that I would have been paid for. So maybe it takes you an extra couple of months to do the final invoicing. Meanwhile, I can't afford to not pay my people, and then I'm out of business. So I'm kind of beholden to you if I sign that contract. Yet you have leverage on me because I want this job in the beginning. So I signed the contract because I need this work and I want this job. And then I'm at a disadvantage during the process. So generally, contracts aren't supposed to be punitive to one party or the other, but I don't think you want to get into a court action to find out, was it punitive enough or not punitive enough that you can escape that particular clause. So you want to be very, very careful about what you sign up for. Get a good construction lawyer, review the contract, make sure there's nothing in there that is punitive and going to, perhaps in the wrong circumstances, put you out of business, or perhaps with an unethical contractor, give them a lot of leverage over you. So you have to be very careful of those types of clauses. And there's many other clauses too that you have to be conscious of, because that can really delay your payments. So retainage and cash flow, retainage is holdback. And I kind of think of a dam holding back water, right? So you've got this big dam and it's holding back water, and then it's letting money through, if you want to think of it in that respect. And the holdback money is maybe a legal requirement. So many jurisdictions require a 10% holdback for lien legislation. Liens are placed on by contractors and suppliers and general contractors on the client's property. So it kind of puts a hold on that property until that lien is settled. So if the lien amount is $100,000, then there's a lien on that property. It may be preventing that client from selling the property, and then there's no real hold on those assets. It's more difficult to collect on. So because of the amounts of money that projects cost, lien legislation was put into place to protect contractors who may run into these kind of issues. But 10% holdback, that means you don't get paid. So then you hold back 10% from your subcontractors and suppliers, and it kind of just goes down the value stream within all the dealings. And that 10% is supposed to be held in a trust so that if there is an issue, then that can be dealt with. So if there is a $100,000 lien on a property and you have more than that in the trust, well, then that can be sort of set aside to settle out the lien. And then if the client needed to, they could sell it. But there's a lot of legal sort of maneuvers that have to go on. And it does depend on your particular jurisdictions. There's always nuanced differences between provinces, between states. But that's the process. But it does put you at a technical disadvantage going through the project when there's money hold back. And on top of that, clients often hold back even more than the 10%, which really puts you at a negative cash flow position if you're not careful. So those kind of things can be problematic with cash flow on projects. So cash flow projections, you can think of, if we take this little strip mall example, how you can think about it over the long term. We have different inflows that we have going month to month, and we have different outflows that we have going month to month. We have net monthly cash flow, and so you see for a long period of time it's negative before it actually turns positive. That could be for a variety of reasons. That could be how your payments have been, your schedule of values. So your breakdown of payments has broken down. That can be because of the holdback monies. As I said, it's very difficult in construction to actually be positive in cash flow. Some contractors will try to what they'll call front end load, meaning they'll try to have extra money being asked for during the early months of the project, which means that they front loaded it. That's kind of unethical if you're doing it to any kind of extent, because the client then is potentially putting themselves at risk. Most clients that are pretty savvy, they've got consultants and cost quantity surveyors that are reviewing the payments to make sure that they're not in excess of the amount of work that was done. So they're inspecting the site and they're looking at the quantities that are being invoiced for. The breakdown of schedules of values was reviewed before the project, and then they're monitoring that to make sure that there's not a large discrepancy to avoid that front-end loading. But on the contractor's side, they may be setting up the site, they may be mobilizing. There's a lot of work that goes on in the planning process, the pre-construction process, and that's hard to get paid for because you don't see the physical stuff on the site. So there is that aspect that you'd want to break down and negotiate in the schedule of values, because it is work and it is cost and it is putting you at a negative cost advantage from cash flow perspective. So we have cash inflow, 300,000. We have cash outflow in January, minus 75,000. Cumulative project cash inflow is 300,000. We've got cumulative project cash outflow is the 375. So that's just repeating there in the minus 75. When we go to the next month, we have cumulative project inflow. That's 350 plus 300. That gives you 650. cumulative project outflow, we have our 375 plus 375, that's 350. So if we're looking at that, that puts us at a negative $100,000. And so that step-by-step process follows through for the whole project. So 1,150,000 is the addition of this plus this plus this gives us that. Cash outflow, this plus this plus this gives us that. And then we're looking at the difference, and the difference is now 150, then 175, then 250, then 275, till it reaches a peak of minus 300 before it gets better on that process. Now, you'll note that as we move here, it does turn positive towards the end. It does turn positive towards the end. So that's important to note, because if it was negative at the end, it means the project is going to lose money. If it goes positive, it means the project is going to make money. So there's a big difference in there between whether that eventually turns negative or positive. It tells you whether the project is good or bad, depending on how it ends up at the end. So you can sort of see as it's going month to month. This is just looking at each month and the difference. It's not large, crazy large every month, but it starts to become cumulative. And when you start thinking about it in cumulative terms, you can see as it's growing month to month to month before it starts to turn positive. And really here, it's probably a lot of that is going to be the release of the holdback monies, timed with final payments of the project. And now, once you reach a certain point, the direct costs are paid for, but you had overhead and you had profit on that project. That's if it's been well executed, and if the quote in the beginning was good, then it should turn positive. So if it's not, that's an indication of other systemic issues that you may have on the project as a whole. But it's really good to understand that. It's also good to understand how that's going to look in reality way ahead of time, because you don't want to be in July where you've used up all of your cash reserves, you have no liquidity, you've used your line of credit, and now you can't pay that last extra amount in this before it turns positive, or before it starts to get better and then turns positive. That would be a shame, because then you will be out of business. So you have to do a lot of pre-planning and make sure how your projects are in alignment and how overall you have the liquidity to pay or not to pay. And if you don't have the liquidity, then you can look at a number of other things. Can we offset the start of this project so that we don't have so much because we're going to be over our limits? Can we negotiate for extra financing way in ahead of time? You know, we've got a really good solid business plan and we can show these projects are profitable, and banks, if it looks like it's going to be profitable and there's enough security that they can take, they'll be on it too, because this is positive for banks. But if you go wandering in trying to increase your line of credit because now you're short and the client's a little bit slow to pay and you're kind of desperate like a deer in the headlights, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. So you have to be proactive and understand how cash flow works. So very good to think about those in those terms, and some reflective questions to think about. You should be able to understand cash flow, understand each party's perspective on it, negotiate the best terms possible, because that will help you with your financing. Understand your clients. Sometimes government industries, believe it or not, are among the worst to actually get paid in a timely fashion, because there's a big bureaucracy that you're dealing with, multiple levels, because they're trying to protect the taxpayers' money. But that takes time. But also generally, you're pretty sure you're going to eventually get paid. So banks and that tend to like those kind of projects. And even in the private sector too, if you've got a big sort of bureaucracy that you're dealing with, it may take longer, but generally you can get more value on those projects and you can cover off your interest costs if you know ahead of time and you've included that in your pricing. I remember we used to do a lot of work at Kodak, and we were a subcontractor to a subcontractor. So very big general contractor, very big mechanical contractor, and then we were a subcontractor to the mechanical contractor. Very often it would take 100 days plus to get paid from the billing. By the time the subcontractor got our bill and then the subcontractor billed the GC, and the GC billed the client. It was a long sort of process to get the billings. Even though what I said, it shouldn't be paid when paid, often it kind of seemed that way. And our payments would be maybe 100 days. But very quickly, even when we were pricing it, we were told that they were long payments. And it wasn't an issue for us to put interest on that. So we knew that it was going to take longer. So that interest cost was taken care of in the pricing of it. At the end of the day, they turned out to be very good projects to do. But we understood well in advance what the issues were with it. So there wasn't very big surprises. If you didn't know that and you went into it and you thought it's like every other client and you're going to get paid in 30 or 40 days and it ends up taking 100 days and you're doing lots of work there, that could sink you. So cash flow is important for those reasons. So you really need to know from the different perspectives of who you're dealing with, good understanding of time frames, and if in doubt, make sure you have plenty of capacity or buffer in your liquidity, because there's always somebody that doesn't pay when you expect it. What is the advantage for a contractor for paid when paid? Just to review that. Well, the advantage is I don't put myself at risk, so I can wait till I get paid. But also, if you're a subcontractor, what if that contractor is not paying you right away? They're using it to pay other jobs or other contractors. That's an unethical thing to do as well. The money going from this project should make sure that it pays your suppliers and your trades from this project. So that is important, and it's not a good situation. And if I'm a contractor or subcontractor to a GC, I don't want it. That would be one thing I would definitely want to stay away from. What are the financial concerns for a contractor if work is performed before it's scheduled? Well, that can be a problem too. If you finish the project too soon, and I've mentioned this in earlier parts of this course or earlier videos, the client may not take over the project till a certain date in the contract, and then you may have to finance the security on that project, and the releases of the cash may not be as released as soon as you expect, depending on what you signed up for with the contract. So you have to be a little bit careful of that, but it's a really good position to be in if you're ahead of schedule than behind schedule, generally speaking. What effect does retainage? So it's hard to be positive on cash flow when you're a contractor just because of the holdback amounts, which is to protect the various parties involved and to ensure that clients don't pay a GC and then the GC doesn't pay a subcontractor. If the client held back that 10%, then that's a good amount to have in a trust account if there's liens against the property, and that can help to protect the client. As well, if it's a government agency, they'll generally have a bond, which would be a payment bond to help protect the public in those cases, so that there's no liens for those purposes. So in our next video, we'll look at cost control, and we're going to jump into construction economics, applied residential house case comparison. So that should be interesting because we're going to be talking about present value, future value. We're going to be talking about what's the advantage of building a house in a shorter period of time with regards to return on investment. Return on investment in construction is why developers really see opportunities being developers. There's additional risk, but there's also additional reward, as you'll see in the next video. So I hope this makes sense, this section on cash flow for you. I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.